So thank you, first of all, for coming. I think we have a very, very interesting topic now, and we will also have a very, I think, exciting discussion on it. It's about the new champions of growth, and I think we all here in the room, we are all thinking about the next generation of ventures that will change businesses and societies in the future, and also it's like probably on a global scale. And I think you'll also often read it or it's like heard about it that I think within the next 8 years, almost half of the biggest companies in the world, the Fortune 500 companies, will likely to be headquarters in the emerging market. So today, let me just here. I'm really, really glad to have three fantastic speakers tonight that can provide such rich and diverse expertise. And I absolutely believe we will have a very exciting discussion. So I think the first speaker, I think we already had the pleasure to see him on stage at the beginning. But I think for the new guests, please allow me maybe to introduce him and say some words. He is a strategist and expert in complex technology management, industrial innovation, and the visionary. He was the CEO of a Switzerland-based management consulting firm and has worked for the UN, the World Bank, and UNESCO. He teaches at major universities in Germany, UK, and Asia. And he is the director of the International Innovation Center in Wuhan, China, and also the vice president of the university. Additionally, he is being honored as the ambassador to the city of Wuhan. Please welcome on stage Professor Peter Sachsenmeier. All right, now, through his multicultural upbringing, he has lived and worked in the US, Europe, and China. He has a German law degree and previously worked for Clifford Chance, the Shanghai Expo, and the World Trade Centers Association. Now he is leading local and cross-border deals with various DAX and MDAX as the head of chemicals, pharmaceuticals, and healthcare at the Bank of China, which is being called as the new champion of growth itself. Please give a warm applause to Mr. Edzard Siemens. Our third speaker, he studied in Munich as well as in London and did his PhD in game theory. He was involved in the AI business and founded a consulting firm before joining the train and rail business. He was the former member of board at Knorr-Bremse, Asia Pacific, and is current a business angel with focus on B2B startup. Please welcome Dr. Henrik Thiele. Okay, let's start. Maybe Professor Sachsenmeier, from your experience, is China a new champion of growth?
Undoubtedly, simply because of the tremendous capacity of the market and the tremendous initiatives in industry. So that's a self-understood answer.
Can you give us maybe one or two short examples?
There are some areas that are only worth exploring in China currently. For example, whatever one thinks of it ideologically and in terms of and systematically, but electromobility is only worth pursuing in China because that's a very large application area. And we already see that in the automotive sector too. China is a must because so many things are happening there which are not happening elsewhere. My car automatically comes as a long version, produced by the same firm in Germany. It's not available as a long version. So it comes with a full complement of electronic aids, pilot systems, rear view camera, etc. All of this means there's a market there that does its things automatically in automotive. Third one, of course, is payment systems. The self-understood ease with which payments are made in China. You know, it's not about big money. We have a feeling in Germany, or I used to have a feeling that it wasn't worth doing something for a very small amount. But if in China you go to a roadside vendor of food, that vendor will have a QR code displayed, and you can pay your 10 yuan, equivalent to about €1.50, by holding your phone next to it and clicking on it. So at least 3 areas which are explosive from China.
Thank you. Mr. Siemens, from your experience as well, do you think China is a new champion of growth?
The very, very short answer is yes, of course. The longer version, which I would like to sort of very quickly elaborate on, is why do we all focus on China? And I think there was a term which was coined by, I think it was Goldman, BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And it turns out that China is larger than all the others combined. And the reason why they're a champion of growth is because they, again, as Professor Sachsenmeier already said, you're allowed to fail there, and that is the main. There's a mandate from the government where you're allowed to fail as long as you somehow show that you're taking a step forward. Yeah.
Okay. And the same question to you, Dr. Thiele. How do you see, is it China a champion of growth?
Well, we actually agreed that we would have a controversial discussion here in order to keep you awake. But it's hard to really have a different opinion than my pre-speakers. Yes, absolutely. But let me focus on something which maybe is not so obvious, at least, at first glance. I mean, we can now talk about these big numbers and hundreds of million middle class and the low consumption that needs to rise once they sort out their security system, blah, blah, blah. But what I really find interesting in China is the culture. And incidentally, the older I grow, the more important I find culture, both on the micro as well as the macro level. Okay, let me give you 2 anecdotal evidence for that. Have a look at Southeast Asia, okay? Southeast Asia economically basically is run by Chinese, okay? They typically in all those countries constitute a minority which is between 5 and 15%, yet they typically dominate the economy up to 80, 85, 90%. And it's interesting to notice that these were migrants, much the same type of migrants as we experience in these influx today in Europe, okay? And within a few generations, they basically took over the economy, okay? And that should make you think, really. And, I mean, speed has no comparison, China. If you work in China, and when I came back to Europe a year and a half ago, all of a sudden I felt like I was in slow motion. Things just didn't happen. In China it goes like bam, 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 bam. And here, yeah, we think about it, we get back to you, and but not yet. So that's one thing. The other thing is, weekend is a very good example. Government action. I had a meeting, actually it wasn't me that participated, but a colleague of mine, where the government, the Ministry of Railways, called in all major suppliers on a Sunday, 7 o'clock in the morning, okay? And the basic message that they wanted to convey is, we have huge amounts of stuff to do, don't take holidays for the next 3 years, right? I mean, it sounds funny, but it also gives you an idea of how things are being done there, okay? Or very trivial example. Go to your local university, okay, and go to the library at, I don't know, 10:30 if it's still open, at 10:30 in the evening, and look how many Chinese are sitting there, how many of us are sitting there. And most of us are happily drinking beer, and most of those are still sitting there and doing their work. So there is, it's really a cultural feature which differentiates them very clearly from most of us. And this is why I have no doubts whatsoever that there is far more to come from China and what we experience in today.
Thank you. What I'm curious about, maybe also like from your experience, Professor Sachsenmeier, is, and I think this question is also very interesting to all of us here. In terms of maybe also the examples that you just provided, where do you see, is like, with the background of the massive growth and also like a changing landscape in China, like opportunities concretely with Germany?
There is one area which is not at the moment seen by the Chinese. A lot of the development areas are driven by central government policy, and central government provides funding to municipal authorities to do things. And the one area that I hope will become very important after this year's party congresses in October is clean tech. The entire Chinese population is aware of the fact that that clean air and blue sky are part of the Chinese dream. There's three elements: money, clean air, blue sky. And my assistant and business manager tells me she has not seen the stars in Wuhan for many years because of air pollution. I think the central government cannot avoid going into clean tech, and I hope they will find the political will to do this. And then there is a very clear collaboration initiative, including, of course, the mergers and acquisition stuff that people talked about in earlier groups, quick buy-in to technologies, quick transfer, quick application.
Mr. Siemens, do you have a comment on it?
Yes. Where do I see the largest opportunity for Germany? Germany is still very predominantly old economy driven, and the Chinese realize that, and what they have done is they have taken the example of the US. If you look at it, it's really interesting. The internet is actually one of the first industries which is completely dominated by the US. If you look at a car, there's European and American manufacturers. If you look at a plane, there's a very large American one, a very large European one, and there was a duopoly usually. And America was the first one to jump on board of the internet, and not only the internet but the whole infrastructure of the internet. And I see China sort of not focusing on the infrastructure per se, but to innovate in the system that they have, that we have at the moment. Now, where does Germany come into this? At the moment, Germany is still stuck in the old economy ways, and the opportunity is, again, I also have to laud my predecessor, M&A. Not only from China, and not only to China, but also from China. I think that the recent transactions which have been announced, and some of which have been very controversial because they failed, or they would have, the government blocked it. Those are actually to be seen more as opportunities to sort of wake up and sort of get out of the old economy and into the new economy. I think every fifth job, I think it was about 20% of the German economy is based upon cars, selling, manufacturing, and producing them. And that's good because they're great cars, but you have to take it a step further because, there has to come something after that. We cannot just be the producers of cars. That's not what Germany should be. And the main impediment to this, to the new M&A strategy of corporates, of German corporates, hopefully, is reciprocity. Yeah? Chinese companies can buy up German companies, but it doesn't work the other way around because of restrictions by the government or by, usually it's by the restrictions of the government, and that is the single largest impediment to that opportunity.
Dr. Thiele, maybe also with your background now as business angels, as investors, where do you also maybe see opportunities maybe for entrepreneurs, for startups here in Germany with China?
Well, I primarily invest in deep tech, as the new buzzword goes, and I clearly see that there's possibilities in that area. I mean, just this startup investment and then bringing it to another country is just one form of the larger group of M&A that was mentioned before. But very clearly, I mean, China is a huge market. China has a lot of problems that they need to solve. And if we can contribute a little bit via these, be it startups or another company that provide pieces of technology, that's going to be great. And let me make one more point. I really, I mean, I'm a trained economist, so maybe I'm sort of a bit dogmatic on that. But I have absolutely zero understanding for the current policy of the German government, for instance. I mean, by the end of the day, buying those companies will provide these companies with huge market opportunities. And the last thing Midas, for instance, wants to do is to chop off the workforce here in Germany because they paid big bucks for it. Okay, so it's going to be great for the German economy, it's going to be great for the Chinese economy, and everybody's going to be happy. Yes, is there a theoretical possibility that the Chinese Secret Service is going to steal some know-how and build this big, huge bomb that will evaporate the whole of Europe? Possible. Likely? Not really. So I don't understand this. It's big opportunities, and we don't take them. Likewise, I mean, as my predecessor pointed out, there is lots of obstacles for European companies to actually acquire companies in China. I looked up the numbers the other day. In 2016, European companies had 8 billion of FDI, foreign direct investment, whereas Chinese companies had 35 in Europe. Okay, and that's a huge mismatch. And in most instances, it's not because they don't want to, it's because they can't. But then again, take into consideration, China needs to learn. There's a lot of things that they're still learning, and they're just grappling with, and it takes time, and they need to establish themselves on the international markets. And as they do, they will gradually learn. And as they learn, they're very able at learning, contrary to us, because we already know everything. And as they learn, they will adapt their model, okay, as suits them best. So I'm actually very optimistic, provided that we open up to each other.
Thank you. Now I think we want to open up this panel. So I think here we have 3 great experts on the stage. Is there any questions? Yeah.
They're all going to get to the wine, I guess, or the beers.
Hi, thanks for your insights. General question. I mean, it was over the news recently that one of the biggest pharmaceutical assets swap was excluding China in their businesses. Why do you think this was the case? And also maybe for you as a Chinese native, from my little or no experience in China, from friends, I think stability is my theory is that stability is a very common denominator within China. Chinese people, part of the culture, why things are going the way they're going and in terms of growth and everything. Do you see also the stability as one of the main reasons for growth or non-growth?
Pharmaceutical for him.
Guilty as charged. I'm guessing Building at Ingelheim, that was the asset swap. There was an asset swap. I think it was the animal sciences and the healthcare. You're catching me on the wrong foot here. Why was it excluded? It was excluded for two reasons. One, because the company which retained the China business saw so much potential in the Chinese market. It's an aging market, and it's fantastic. It's the growth numbers are through the roof, are double digits, and if it's below 15%, you're doing something wrong. And the second one was, if I remember that correctly, there was a legal problem, but don't hold me to that. I hope I could.
The market potential for healthcare is enormous, simply because the population wants it, and there is a big lag vis-a-vis anything that we know in terms of knowledge and care. Unbelievable potential. Security, I don't know what you allude to, but I must tell you that I feel wonderfully safe in China. It's one of the safest places on earth that I know. But China does have 1.3 or so billion people, and it is the linguistically and ethnically most diverse country on earth, with several hundred languages and many nationalities, and a great divide between rich and poor. So take your pick.
I think in terms of growth, what China has differently is the government, and I think the government, it's not only like the government here, it's really huge. So there's a lot of very powerful people, and also in the party there are a lot of very capable entrepreneurs and business leaders, such as Jack Ma. And I think in China you have this set goals, right? It's like every 5 years, and also it's like Made in China 2025. The party, the government has set up goals that need to be achieved. And I think until now they have always achieved, I think, the numbers. So they're pretty pushing on this. And also secondly, I think now, as you can see, is like economy keeping up and catching up, and also it's like what you can see also is like on the to-do list of the CEOs of the Chinese companies is, especially in manufacturing, is going global, right? It's like they want to become true multinationals, I think, within the next 10 years. So, and I think it's like what is sometimes missing, I think, is like, why is the Chinese government doing this? And I think it's because they have a high pressure, because the society, it has to, or it needs to be transformed, because otherwise it will break down, definitely. It's if you have, for example, higher wages and you still like sell cheap, I think that's it's not a right balance anymore. And also I think what you can sometimes read or hear in the press is always like some pessimistic headlines, like it's like growth declining. But I think still there is growth, right, in China. And I think if you're looking for stable growth, that's kind of ridiculous, because it's I think it's just natural, I think. And Dr. Thiele, do you want to add something?
3 good answers, no need for a 4th one.
So when you talk about growth in China, maybe you can give us a little bit more insight into 2 dimensions. One dimension are the different industry and companies. We have on one hand very modern companies like Huawei, Xiaomi, and so on. On the other hand, was mentioned already, we have coal and steel, and in the middle, millions of companies producing some sort of plastic parts. So this is one dimension. What does growth means along this dimension? And second, let's look at China. We have the coastal areas, we have the northeast with coal and steel, We have then Wuhan, Xi'an up to the northwest. What does growth means along this dimension?
Okay, so let me start with a couple of generic remarks. I mean, the first thing is in Europe, and that has abated a little bit recently, but this threat that China is going to crash and blah blah blah. Well, the Chinese growth is becoming smaller, right? I mean, basically, there's no wonder that this happens. This is decreasing marginal return to capital. That's microeconomics 101. Okay, and I'm surprised that so many people are surprised that this is the case. But hey, now when it comes to different industries and also the different regions, and that's really the core of your question, if I understand it properly, then obviously there's a great disparity. You have like the Rust Belt areas in the Northeast, which are primarily populated by very old economy enterprises, steel notably, coal mining and those kind of things. And while there are some modernization efforts, still a lot of these enterprises need to close down. In fact, some of them, or quite a few of them, actually can't, because the government prevents them from doing what they're supposed to do from an microeconomic perspective. Yeah, but that's also quite normal that as an economy, leaps or gradually evolves to a new step, there's this process of, well, Schumpeter call it the constructive destruction. Yeah? So there's nothing new about this, and this causes some friction, and it will also cause some friction in China. Will there be bumps and ups and downs? Yes, for sure. But this is nothing new. I mean, it's not, singular to China. You also have got areas which are growing at a massive scale, 30, 40, 50%. I mean, we haven't really talked about mobile internet, but China is a completely different animal when it comes to mobile internet. I just read an article a couple of months ago on Bloomberg that said, welcome to the People's Republic of WeChat. Okay, I mean, WeChat is basically, how did somebody else call it, the remote control of your life in China. Okay, and this is something which is, completely unimaginable here in Europe, and they are massively in front of us. It's not, what still can they learn from us? It's what can we learn from them? Yeah, exactly. I mean, you mentioned the QR codes and the payment system and all of this stuff. So is it going to be smooth and gradual? No, there's going to be bumps and ups and downs, but is it manageable? Yes, no doubt about this.
Okay, thank you. Is it a short question? Okay.
So my question is the internationalization agenda of most Chinese companies. I see kind of a contradiction, because if I start a company in China, I already have the market. What is the motivating factor for me to go international if I already have the market? Like WeChat. WeChat is in China, but not in, let's say, in the US. So what is really the motivation to internationalize?
One word, it's sexy. No, it really is sexy. For Chinese, it is really sexy. I mean, they often not even aware that, anything dwarfs compared to the Chinese market, but yet they still think it is so sexy to go to, even, Argentina, Brazil, and Africa, and whatever. Yeah, just because it's foreign countries. Yeah.
Replace sexy with face and status, and you're there.
Sexy.
But you're right, economically it does make a lot of sense.
Let me just say the government incentives for internationalizations are dramatic. You actually there is also a strange adoration of large numbers. So big companies get more, small get less, even in percentage terms. So if you go outside, you get a cash bonus from your municipal government. If you go outside and are listed on a stock exchange, you get a bigger cash bonus. If you become an international Forbes 500, you get an even bigger cash bonus. So there is apart from sex, there is that other ingredient, money.
Okay, now let me elaborate a little bit since we said sexy. Okay, that was a bit short. I just thought it over. Historically, China has been dominated by foreign powers, at least until the Second World War or the independence in 1949. Okay, and eventually something at which Uncle Xi called the 100 years of humiliation have ended now. Okay, so it's also by going abroad, by being able to sell stuff to outside country, in a way it's also making up for that, somehow still deeply ingrained sentiment of inferiority, which now gradually, or sometimes leapfrog-wise, turns into superiority feeling. Okay, so that's, in my view, got something to do with it.
Okay, so as you can see, it's a hot topic and also a very exciting topic. And I think, as we have heard, China is indeed a new champion, or it's like current champion of growth. And I think this topic will also affect us more and more, also in Germany. And also we have heard that there are many opportunities out there. So I also encourage you, maybe if you're interested, to look deeper into it. And it's not only always the States, UK, but also I think there's other markets like China. So thank you. I hope that was interesting.